'Tis the 2nd of the 9th. The time is 13 minutes past 10. And the news cycle in the weird and wacky world that is the one that F1 Formula One doesn't stop. It's the morning after the night before, and we've got so many things to talk about. We've got to talk about Checo Perez and whether this is now his stay of execution. Why? Well, because Juan Colapinto has come into that Williams team and rejuvenated them. We will talk about Max Verstappen. We will talk about Red Bull's broader issues. Christian Horner chiming in on issues that they're having with the car and why they're being masked now in other teams. 2, we've got to talk about Toto Wolff, who has chimed in on the balls that are red. And the main event, of course, has to be the friction between the McLaren driver pair. Post-race, you will have seen their very awkward interactions, barely wanting to talk, both in the cool-down room and shortly thereafter at the driver's press conference. And Lando Norris had some things to say, didn't he? Let's talk about Toto very quickly, because he said of Red Bull that that's a very different team and a very different car, a very different competitive landscape now as versus earlier on in the season. He said that I have no insight, obviously, though, that this is not the Red Bull team that we saw at the start of the season, and there are very many automotive pugilism threads at which we can pull in that statement. Is he talking about the operational excellence? We're seeing longer pit stops now at the balls that are red, about which Max Verstappen clearly is not happy. For the avoidance of doubt, he says that he needs 2 things to remain as a driver through to the end of his contract at 2028, a Red Bull driver. Those 2 things being harmony and a car capable of winning races and therefore championships. As at September of 2024, he has neither. And this is going to be a problem going forward, right? Because we already know that they're having conversations, Max Verstappen's team, with Toto, the boy who cried wolf. So desperate is Toto to get Max Verstappen in that team. At the very latest, 2026 talks happened over the summer break, but those went nowhere, said Toto Wolff. But he's still speaking openly and honestly about his dying wish, which is having the Dutchman drive for him one day. So keen is he to fix for the errors of Christmas past that he didn't sign him in the first place when he had the chance in 2015. Oh, the humanity. Toto Wolff continues. I think that Max was able to keep it going for a while with his ability, but now it seems that the sheer result, that because of the results, it's Max Verstappen. He's the difference. He is what's driving Red Bull. And again, this is the variance between him and Checo Perez, right? Max Verstappen can put that car in places where the Mexican Minister of Defense has no chance. On the Checkered Flag podcast, Toto Wolff expounded. Here's what he said about Max Verstappen. He said that earlier on in the season, it was a joint effort. It was Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Now, though, the performance has been driven wholly by one Max Verstappen. It's no longer Red Bull victories. Those victories belong to Max Verstappen. He's being praising, complimentary of Max, isn't he, with a view to fix the relationship between Toto and Jos Verstappen, the relationship that became fractured on the back of Silverstone 2021, when Toto Wolff failed, neglected the relationship between him and the Verstappens by not picking up the phone to check on Max Verstappen's, on his wherewithal, that's not the correct term, on his condition post the crash. Oh, the humanity, the plot thickens. And people will always say asymmetric braking. Naysayers will talk about what's gone on. Why now? As far as Max not being able to turn in the car, did they have a fiddle brake? Were they using an inertia valve? Was there something to say for torque steer? It would seem that way, but there are 2 sides to every story, are there not? Unless we forget, Mark Hughes wrote a brilliant article that concluded in the convergence story, it's one principally of Mercedes and McLaren catching Red Bull as versus Red Bull losing time on the rest. If indeed he'd taken something off of the Red Bull car, as alluded by Lobato of DAZN, F1 journo, legendary settings, and again, all F1 journos are created equally as far as their integrity, but some are more equal than others. Lobato is one of the good ones, isn't he, Liam? You're a legend. All this Lando hype and he's bottling it already. We'll get to it, Liam, I promise. It gets techie as far as Lobato, because he said he's had it confirmed by senior F1 personnel that the FIA had a word with Red Bull on the back of a warning, a whistleblowing operation, that they had something, whether a fiddle brake, a torque steer, an inertia valve, that enabled them to facilitate, get your words out, Cameron, to facilitate, bring on oversteer again. We know that understeer kills speed, lap time in these ground effect cars, and if they had something where they could mitigate for that automatically or otherwise, then that would be brilliant. Lobato started the rumour because he was on the broadcast and he said he knows, having spoken to two sources, which is what you're supposed to do as a journalist, confirm your sources. He spoke to two of them and they said there had been a conversation with the FIA and that they'd removed something around China, and that indeed was driving why that car's slower. The massive drop-off in performance. Then, oh, the humanity. Ted Kravitz, by the way, who is also a legendary one, on his notebook yesterday said that he's spoken to many people, insiders up and down the paddock, and they've all refuted Lobato's claim. They said that there is nothing that they were aware of, no conversations that they know of, as far as the FIA advising Red Bull that there was a fiddle brake or something to that effect that they needed to take off the car. The racing engineer or the pit crew member, the rear right pit crew member, he also came out and said something similar on Twitter, didn't he? But again, what else did you expect him to say? FIA similarly, because there is agency. The FIA released a statement, said that Article 11.1.2 had absolutely nothing to do with anything that any team had already instituted for, that this is them future-proofing the 2026 rules. Behave yourself. Do you know what I mean? Is Santa Claus going to come down a chimney and deliver my Christmas presents this year? Behave yourself. Oh, and by the way, this is this is Checo Perez's stay of execution, is it not? Another lowly, poor performance. Where did he finish? I don't even know. Did he finish 8th again? 8th. Come on, Checo Perez. Do you know what I mean? This is your time to shine, chap. People have leveraged many a criticism at you. You're a paid driver, $70 million every single year. That Mexico is a growth market, both for Formula One and Red Bull, that you sell because of your name, a load of merch over there and a load of energy drinks. That's the only reason people are saying why Checo Perez is still there as at September 2024. Why? Well, because his performance have been shoddy hitherto, season to date. He hasn't been the Mexican Minister of Defence since Turkey 2021 and Abu Dhabi 2021. Where has that fella gone? The fella that would defend, the fella that was so instrumental in deciding which way the World Drivers' Championship went in 2021. The dude that roundly outperformed his counterpart Valtteri Bottas. Where has that fella gone, ladies and gents? Nowhere to be seen. Radio silent. He may as well disappeared into the harbour, as did Ferrari's form this year. Nowhere to be seen, and that is a problem now more than ever. Why? Because convergence is a thing. McLaren have the whip hand as far as the quickest machinery as at September 2024. Lando and Oscar are both driving the wheels off of that car to a fault, some may argue. That's why now more than ever the Checo Perez decision is important. He has 2 races, Baku and Singapore. Yes, of course he went well around there in previous seasons, but he needs to outperform now more than ever. I feel my spidey senses are telling me that Christian Horner may already have made the decision. Why? Well, because Danny Rick's talking about there will be news around an announcement, Liam Lawson announcement, circa this time next weekend. We will hear more. Liam Lawson potentially set to be announced as a V-carb driver, RB V-carb, potentially. What does that mean, therefore, for Checo Perez? Because 4 cannot go into 3. The names of which I talk, of course, Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, Danny Rick, and Checo Perez. Max Verstappen will be there. We don't even need to talk about him. He's a dead cert. 4, therefore, does not go into 3. This is very basic maths. And again, Danny Rick said you can expect to hear news. He's uncertain about his own position, his surety going forward as a driver, as part of the Red Bull Racing family, whether that's RBV Carb or Red Bull Racing proper. And that there is going to be news coming out about this circa this time next week. Liam Lawson set to be announced as a replacement for Danny Rick, I imagine. If indeed speculation and conjecture is a real thing. The front wing, oh, the humanity. We're talking about Dean. I wanted to save that to tonight. The front wing. So there has been chat rumour and speculation about the front wings that Mercedes and McLaren are running, that people are questioning why they all of a sudden are so quick, attributing it to foul play potentially and dodgy front wings. I'll tell you what, we'll nail that properly tonight because it's a proper new piece. Papaya Rules is free to race, living on the edge. Oh, the humanity. Sidal says F1 now has a meme strategy named Papaya Rules. Let's get onto that then very quickly. We'll nail that over the next 5 to 10 minutes or less. So look, yesterday was chaos. And the F1 community are divided on the back of it, right? Some are saying we don't need F1 snowflakery. What F1 snowflakery to them is that team orders, that Oscar Piastri plays nice, and they build a campaign around Lando Norris because he's the one with the whip hand as far as the Drivers' Championship. He's the one, as at September 2024, that's closest, that stands the best opportunity of overhauling Max Verstappen's his favourability as far as the driver's standing. Some people are saying that we don't want to see team orders, that I'm a die-hard F1, a grizzled F1 vet, and we don't want to hear Andrea Stella coming over the radio and telling us to Jack Piastri, who he will be, if not is already, an absolutely brilliant driver. What we want to see is McLaren drivers, right? You want to see the best race the best in the best machinery, and I hear that. However, it's DEFCON 1 now. This is the time, as aforementioned in the video that I put forth yesterday. This is the time. Listen, Christian Horner said it best in the Netflix Drive to Survive documentary, right? If you really want something, then you will do anything to get that. McLaren didn't see themselves in a race for the drivers or the constructors this year, but they are now, meaning therefore that I don't want to hear Papaya Rules. What is that? Sometimes you got to break some eggs, McLaren. Got to do some things that you didn't expect to have to do, right, to get where you want to go to. I understand that this is a surprise now that they're in this position, that they foresaw that they'd be fighting for championships and races so frequently this time next year, that it's happened all of a sudden. And this happens in Formula One sometimes, unexpected. Murray Walker always says anything can and usually does happens in the sport that we call the one that Fs. McLaren therefore need to amend their stance. I see Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris in the post-race drivers press conference, and they didn't even talk, looking away. I was reminded of Prost and Senna again. McLaren settings many moons ago, circa 1988, 1989, right? They didn't even want to talk. Couldn't even connect eyes. Oscar doing one of these, looking at this side. Lando doing one of these with his cap firmly over his eyes, averting his gaze. When asked the question whether Lando feels like he needs help, ergo, does he feel like McLaren have been sabotaging over him, his efforts to win the driver championship over the past couple of races? Lando gave the proper answer, toed the party line, gave the PR exam answer. He said, listen, I'm here to race. I don't feel like I should need help. When asked about Oscar Piastri's very aggressive move into the second chicane, he said, you know what, it was a bit touch and go. If I'd have braked a metre later even, me and him would have crashed. And that therefore would have been against the Papaya Rules, which Zach Brown and Andrea Stella have since come out and clarified that all they need to do is race cleanly and don't touch. Lando's point of contention though, is that had he raced as aggressively as his teammate Oscar Jack Piastri, that they would have touched and come together. I put forth this supposition. Why is Oscar Jack Piastri trying to overtake Lando Norris there at the second chicane on the very first bloody lap, where most of the incidents over the course of the past season to date, that's when they happen? I understand Oscar Jack Piastri is a racing driver, and if you're a racing driver and you no longer go for a gap, then you're no longer a racing driver. I get it, but this is bigger than that now. Point scoring, even towards the end of the race, he's racing for second, 18 points. What does that mean to Oscar Jack Piastri? This isn't a race victory now. Everything needs to be rooted in context. Papaya coloured team, you're talking about Papaya Rules. Why? There is a drivers' championship on offer here if you move accordingly. Zach Brown, If anyone here has seen the Will Buxton eye roll, listen, I tell you what I've seen from Will Buxton. I've seen a very impassioned rant from Will Buxton, legend of the scene, and again, giving a bit of colour and personality. And he said they're going to lose this unless, exactly what I said in my video yesterday, me not having seen his take. But this is obvious. This isn't rocket science. They are going to lose this unless they start moving accordingly, making decisions with a view to build a championship campaign. Constructors, they'll get it. They don't need to change anything to get that. But here with the drivers, because it will be marginal, what they can't afford to do is keep giving away points, and another 3 points given away as far as variance, optimizing for their circumstance yesterday. If they'd have just effected the team orders towards the end of the race, nobody would have died, nobody would have been hurt, there would have been no reputational downside for them doing that. People around the world, F1 community, both grizzled F1 vets and part-time casuals, would have understood why. Because there is a championship at stake. For Pete's sake, Zach Brown, Andrea Stella, this makes no sense. I don't want to hear anything about the papaya rules. How about world championship winning rules and team orders? How about that, Andrea Stella? And I love those, particularly Andrea Stella. I think he's going to be god tier as a team principal. You only need to hear the way he talks about. Oh, and by the way, you will have heard him on the bloody Beyond the Grid podcast talking about that they weren't looking for, as far as improvements on the McLaren car, that what they weren't looking for was one part or other. That their success wasn't going to be born of a fluky upgrade, a cheeky front wing, or a flaw that just so happened to work wonders. What their success was going to be a function of, Andrea Stella's words, not mine by the way, what their success, he said, was going to be a function of is instituting and implementing for the parameters out of which frequent and consistent success will be born. What does that mean? That means team orders, chap. That means being ruthless when need be, chap. That's what that means. And that's what McLaren need to do now more than ever, as at the 2nd of the 9th, 2024. What are we doing, Dean? They need to focus while RB20s are done a down. So this is what I'm saying, Dean. The racing gods have blessed them in earnest. Bend the knee then and make decisions accordingly. Move accordingly. Your modus operandi now, your objective as at 2024 is different. You're not here to partake. I don't imagine. You're not here to partake and get second place. If you are, then it's cool. And listen, ignore me. I will walk back everything aforementioned. But if you're here to win, I'm not talking about races, I'm talking about championships, both drivers and constructors, then Will Buxton is right to roll his eyes at Zach Brown, talking all this altruistic United colours of Benetton, diversity and inclusion nonsense. No, winning is what this is about. Drivers' championships. This is. Can you imagine if Lando won the drivers this year and beat Maximilian Verstappen? Can you imagine what that would mean for McLaren going forward as a going concern? Sponsors, Google Chrome, Dark Trace, all that other stuff. In negotiating, Zach Brown, your commercial value will do one of these, chap, if you have yourself a drivers' championship. Why? Constructors, cool, that's good, and the money falls off the back of that for the teams, McLaren, et al, whoever. But the drivers, that's all that anybody really cares about. Why? Because it's heritage, it's prestige, it's Senate, it's pros. That's where the glory and the glamour comes from as far as Formula One. It's always been in the drivers. The teams have to take a back seat, 2 seats to the drivers and their priorities. So here's what McLaren need to do going forward, because they have a problem. You only need to look at the interaction. It was cold, it was frosty between Oscar and Lando. They even asked the question, they said about going forward, what do you think? Do you think that McLaren, Zach Brown, Andrea Stella need to start effecting team orders because the Drivers' Championship is at stake? Lando trotted out the party line as he does. Again, I don't like it when Lando just gives the exam answer. I kind of want to hear some teeth, feel some teeth from Lando, because we know he has that. When he's talking to Lewis, he doesn't mess around then, does he? When he was telling Lewis about you should win every race because you got the fastest car, you've only got 2 or 3 drivers to beat. You weren't shy then, were you, Lando? So why are you now shy towards Oscar Piastri now that it's time to talk up, to back yourself with a Drivers' Championship at stake? Why now is Lando all of a sudden a big man in groups? not keen to leverage the proper verbiage at the proper people, the related parties. You're trying to avert your eyes and your gaze from Oscar Piastri. I don't like that. That's not me saying that Lando Norris isn't a brilliant driver. You only need to look at his pole lap and the way that he takes Lesmo 1 and 2 to realise that. Although I say all this to say this. Lando, during that press conference, when he was asked about having a helping hand, whether now with the Drivers' Championship well at stake, well in hand, with him capable of winning it, whether McLaren did a wrong thing, another wrong decision, another strategic faux pas in allowing Oscar Piastri to eat into Lando Norris's lead to the tune of 3 points as versus Max Verstappen. 3 points, 7 points is what they lost by virtue of their lack of decision making at Hungary. So we're talking 10 points now in missed opportunity, amongst others, because you can see pit stops and poor execution, all of that. We're talking more than 10 points, but the obvious ones, the low hanging fruit, mistakes and faux pas from McLaren, 10 points. What about that, Lando? Are they making a mistake? Are your team even dropping the World Drivers' Championship board? That's what he was asked yesterday in the post-race drivers' press conference. And Lando again trotted out the exam answer. Very honourable of him, endearing, even self-deprecating. Well, listen, I just want to race. I don't want to be handed anything. Like, do you know what I mean? Do you need help in this fight against Max Verstappen? And again, it's a loaded question, isn't it? Do you need help? Asking an F1 driver that, he's never going to say yes, but he does need help. Lando Norris responded thus, you know what, it would be nice, Lando said, but I'm here to race. He responds, Oscar Piastri, what do you think? Are your team dropping the ball as far as not instituting team orders? Is there a Drivers' Championship that they are losing now because of their decision making, cute ones, or lack thereof? Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri did one of these. Nothing to add. Didn't even say anything. Tom Clarkson had to say the nothing to add piece for him. Oscar Piastri is peeved. You saw when he popped, both of them are cheesed off at the moment, and Zach Brown needs to manage for it, just as Ron Dennis had to before with Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. What are we doing here? This is nonsense. Oscar, when he pulled into the pit lane, almost hit a scrutineer, didn't he? Knocked over the second place placard, just as Sebastian Vettel did so many moons ago when he was arguing back and forth with one Lewis Hamilton. This, ladies and gents, is techie, but how do you like your F1? If not stakes and rancor, Oscar is still too inconsistent. Robert says, I don't hate it. Visual. Lando said he wants the support, but it's a team decision. He's not going to confront Oscar on camera. I reckon Oscar has a clause in his contract, thanks to Mark Webber, potentially, but how enforceable are those? What's us going to do? Break clause? Go and join another team because Lando Norris is an F1 driver and acts like an F1 driver is. And Zach Brown and Andreas Stella start to move like an F1 team capable of winning, who believes that it can win itself a World Drivers' Championship. What's Oscar Piastri going to do? What is he going to do as he did Alpine and say, listen, I no longer drive for McLaren, notwithstanding the fact that they have a car capable of winning championship? Pull the other one, visual. No chance. Oscar knows. Oscar understands. He gets the assignment. This is F1 driving. If he didn't get the assignment, there's no way they would put one round the outside of Lando Norris at the second chicane at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza yesterday. That is ballsy. And Oscar Jack Piastri is nothing if not a ballsy racing driver. Please see Senna and Schumacher if you want comparators. But yeah, and still, listen, let me tell you this. Now, Oscar Jack Piastri didn't respond to the question asked about help, about whether strategically McLaren are dropping the ball and losing themselves a World Drivers' Championship, as at the 1st of the 9th, 2024, the Italian Grand Prix, that Oscar Jack Piastri didn't even respond. There was not a nothing to add. There was no, yeah, you're right, yeah, I support Lando in this. There was nothing. Oscar Jack Piastri, unlike Lando Norris, will not toe the party line. Zach Brown, Andreas Stella, listen to this. As did Ron Dennis before in 1988, 1989 settings and 2007 settings to a lesser extent. And Toto the Boy Who Cried Wolf, 2016, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. Zach Brown, the commerciality of the thing is absolutely it. You've nailed it, chap. The sponsors, Google, Chrome, Dartrace, that's all well and good. But now this is time for racing, chap. You need to get your arms around this situation. The rancor, the acrimony, the salaciousness between your drivers, Messrs Piastri and Norris. Get your arms around this in real time. Time to put on your big boy pants, Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, because for the avoidance of doubt, Houston, aka McLaren, we have ourselves a problem. There is a drivers' championship at stake here, and you are currently sacrificing your opportunity that very few F1 teams in all of F1 history ever get at the altar of altruism. What are we doing here? This makes no sense. Altruism plays no part in Formula One, at least not for championship winning teams. Andrea Stella, Zach Brown, I implore you to take that into consideration when you're making your decisions around your drivers and affecting team orders or failing to going forward, because this is getting techie. I do not want for Lando, Zach Brown, Andrea Stella this time next year to look back on a golden gilt-edged opportunity that they failed to grab with both hands. McLaren, please, for the love of the racing gods, the old and the new, take this opportunity. Please don't do what so many others have before you and proceed to seize defeat from the very tempting, the pleasant jaws of F1 victory.